Scathach, the Witch of Dun Scath, Goddess of the Dead, Gatekeeper of Tir na nO, and Mentor of Legends. But what about the Scathach of the Fate franchise? How well does she compare to her mythical counterpart? And what grade would I give her depiction? Let's get into it. Scathach is a Lancer class servant, which, like her most famous pupil, is very much a no-brainer choice. While other weapons might be wielded, they aren't going to be more famous than Gae Bolg, or Gae Bolg. I skipped the disclaimer this time, but Irish names are still hard, especially once regional variations are factored in. Anyway, Lancer is an obvious choice for Scathach, but that's not the whole story, because while she is famed as a superb warrior, she was said to be just as talented at magic, particularly her abilities as a seer. So caster might be a possibility for her too. Though, speaking of casters, the character Scathach Skadi is not part of this video. She will be getting her own separate one. Getting into her character design, Scathach is dressed up in some really tight clothing, clearly meant to emphasize her figure. Scathach is often depicted as being attractive, and while this still doesn't quite fit the image of the Celtic warrior queen that she is supposed to be, it's at least better than Maeve's design. It kinda resembles Cu Chulainn's design, which is probably intentional since they are teacher and student. In her first ascension, she is wearing a mask to cover her mouth and nose. It gets removed for her second ascension, while also changing the color of parts of her clothing from black to purple. For her third and final ascension, she puts on a black veil, and also grabs a second spear. As for her bunny costume, this is just blatant fan service. Tamamo Cat straight up admits it in the Land of Shadows event where you get it from. I can respect that. I think I prefer when people are honest about these things, and at least it's a costume rather than a main outfit. Overall, Scathach's design is, well, it's not great, but at least she looks like a warrior. Maybe I'm being nicer because there are far fewer depictions of Scathach than there are for Maeve. Moving into her skill set, Scathach's first skill is Wisdom of Dun Scath, a skill meant to represent the knowledge Scathach has acquired throughout her long life teaching, slaying gods, and living outside the human world. Not only is she able to acquire skills from others, she can then teach those skills to worthy students. Also included is that she is a clairvoyant, able to look into the future and see what lies ahead. Now, this skill is a bit mixed from a lore perspective. On the one hand, Scathach was indeed a teacher who passed on her skills to others, and she was also a talented seer, looking into Cu Chulainn's future and seeing what awaited him. But on the other hand, nothing is ever said about her being able to just take skills from other people, or that her abilities as a seer were up to the level of clairvoyance. And while Scathach later dwelled outside the human world in her role as a goddess of the dead and the gatekeeper of Tir na nO, her being a godslayer, well, we will get back to that for her third skill. Scathach's second skill is Primordial Rune, knowledge of ancient runes, and the ability to wield rune magics. Now, I've already mentioned that Scathach was as capable with magic as she was with a spear, so that's not strange. But then the FGO materials say that Scathach's runes come from Scandinavia. While the runes from Scandinavia are probably the best known, the Celts had runes too from their interactions with the Norse. As for the Gaelic peoples of Ireland, they didn't have runes, instead using another writing system called Om, with its surviving examples found carved into stones. So while it is true that Scathach had great talent with magic, it didn't use Scandinavian runes. They try to explain this in Scathach's trial quest, that the Norse runes are more effective and better for warriors, but that doesn't change the fact that they aren't things Scathach used in myth. Scathach's third skill is Godslayer, a skill meant to represent Scathach's talent for slaying divinities. The story is that Scathach spent so much time guarding her fortress at Dun Scath that she has become adept at killing pretty much anything, including gods. Now that sounds pretty impressive. That begs the question, how many gods has Scathach killed in her legends? 0. None. At least as far as anyone knows from the stories that exist. Even in the stories we do have, Scathach isn't racking up body counts. Her students do that. But since this skill is specifically about killing divinities, something that Scathach does not do, that makes this skill a fail, and by extension the part of her first skill that relies upon that. Scathach's noble phantasm is Gae Bolg Alternative, whereupon she creates a second spear, stabs into her enemy with one spear, then throws the second one at the enemy. Gae Bolg, which means belly spear in Gaelic, might have the most detailed lore for a weapon I've seen thus far, to the point that it might deserve its own video. It is a barbed spear created from the bones of the sea monster Corrod, which we see depicted in the craft essence Beast of Billows. Curud was killed by another sea monster named Cuinhin, which apparently is also the name of a monster in the Cthulhu mythos, and those are the only artworks I have of this creature. If you combine these two names together, you get Curud Cuinhin, which you may recall is the name of Cu Alter's MP. There are various different stories about the Gae Bolg, including one detailing exactly how it is to be used. That first the spear must be prepared in a stream or river, then cast from the fork of the toes, meaning you throw it with your foot? Or you just do what Summer Scathach does and kick it at your enemy. That's the only way that makes sense to me at least. But it's when the spear enters its foe that its true nature is revealed, creating barbs that fill every part of the body, causing horrific internal injuries, kinda like what we see at the end of Cu Alter's version of this MP. It's so bad that you actually have to cut the spear out of its victims after it is used. Needless to say, this is guaranteed to be fatal. It's a weapon awful enough that it was only ever actually used twice in the Legends. While this is depicted a bit differently in Fate, having causality be reversed so that the spear always strikes the target's heart, at the end of the day, you are getting the same result in both the Legends and in Fate, in theory at least. Of course, the Gae Bolg is best known as the weapon of Cu Chulainn, but it was given to him by Scathach, who taught him how to use it. We don't see Scathach herself using it in the Legends, nor do we know if she actually made the weapon. If she had, then perhaps she made more than one of them, or at least has the ability to. That's the only way I can explain why Scathach would have two of them for this MP, presumably why it is called Gae Bolg Alternative rather than just Gae Bolg. As for Summer Scathach's version being an AoE, presumably all the barbs that fill a person after they are stabbed with a spear decided to appear early, turning it into a rain of death from the outside rather than from within. If I was to depict this MP according to how it's described in the Legends, I'd have the spear float down a river, be picked up by its wielder, and then stabbed or thrown into the foe, leading to a bloody mess like what we see in Cu Alter's MP. But really, I'm just nitpicking over artistic expression at this point. Gae Bolg is a great MP choice for Scathach. Though, Gae Bolg is not her only MP. In Fate Extella Link, rather than just having Gae Bolg rain down spears like her summer version does, she gets a different MP entirely, Gate of Skye. This summons a massive gate that sucks in all enemies, because every MP in Fate Extella Link has to be a massive AoE for gameplay reasons. This gate is supposed to lead to her realm, the Land of Shadows, and so everything that gets sucked into this gate is going to die horribly in her dark realm. But, as I'll get into when talking about her craft essence, let's just say that the Fortress of Dun Scath on the Isle of Skye isn't quite like how it is depicted in Fate. It is a very dangerous place, but it is not instantly fatal to go there. Also, Scathach is the ruler of Dun Scath. Her daughter Uahach is the actual gatekeeper. However, there is another door that Scathach does have control over in some legends, the entrance to Tir na no, or the Land of the Young. It is either another name for the Celtic Otherworld, or just one part of it, a paradise for the gods and dead heroes, though there are stories of living people being able to visit at the invitation of one of its residents. The only way to become a resident of Tir na no is to be a hero who fell in battle. After death, such heroes would make their way to the gate, where Scathach would welcome them, similar to how the Valkyries guide worthy souls to Valhalla. But if this MP was actually meant to send people to Tir na no rather than Dun Scath, forgive me if I find the concept of an MP sending people to heaven to be not particularly threatening. In other words, this MP is a fail. Scathach's craft essence is gazing upon Dun Scath, depicting her realm, the Land of Shadows. Dun Scath, also known as the Fortress of Shadows, is the home of Scathach, the place where she resides and trains those who are able to reach her. Scathach's own name means the Shadowy One, so she certainly picked a fitting place to live. Now, according to the Sea's text, Dun Scath, located upon the Isle of Skye, is a separate realm full of shadows and death where no light can reach, an extremely dangerous place. We even give the place a visit in her second interlude. But what is Scathach's realm actually like in the legends? Well, for one, it's not just a legend, it's a real place. The Isle of Skye is an island off the west coast of Scotland with a population of around 10,000. It even has its own flag. As for Scathach's fortress Dun Scath, that too is a real place, though presumably another castle was built over where it once was located, and that castle has since become a ruin. We don't know what the real Dun Scath might have looked like in its prime, not just the castle itself, but the landscape as well. Terrain tends to change over time, so what it might have looked like over 2,000 years ago is probably not what it looks like today. This is something we will encounter again when it's time to do a video on Leonidas. With all of that said, I can't exactly blame either the FGO devs or others for adding supernatural elements to a place whose name means the Fortress of Shadows, and whose primary resident's name means the Shadowy One. And while Dun Scath might not be some shadowy realm of death, it was still a very dangerous place. But that had more to do with its terrain and its residents rather than anything supernatural. Scathach's Valentine Sea is bitter pitch black, depicting a heart chocolate with Gae Bolg piercing it. The sea's text might be the shortest of any sea in the game, there are only 4 words. It's a pretty straightforward gift, a chocolate for Valentines with a very direct message. Scathach will take your heart, beware. And now for characterization, starting with a look into the legends surrounding Scathach. Now, before I get started, there are 2 things I have to mention. The first is that the primary story Scathach appears in, Tokmark Emire, or The Wooing of Emer, is not a story about Scathach, it's about Cu Chulainn. Because of this backstory section is as much about Cu Chulainn as it is about Scathach. The second thing is that, unfortunately, it is now believed that there probably were more legends about Scathach in Irish mythology, but they have since been lost. What her full story might have been, we just don't know, and we never will. While this does leave room for creative license, for the purposes of this video, I am going to stick with what legends we do have about Scathach, even if, in the past, there might have been far more of them. As Cu Chulainn was growing into a young man, the men of Ulster started to get a bit concerned about him. Specifically, they were worried that this strong and attractive boy would seduce all the women of Ulster. In other words, they needed to get this kid married before that could happen. Now, Cu Chulainn wasn't opposed to that. He had his eye on someone named Emer, and she was also in love with him. But her father, Forgal Monarch, was opposed to it. Forgal gave Cu Chulainn a challenge, to journey to the Isle of Skye and be trained by Scathach, a warrior queen of legendary skill, but also whose training was known to be so difficult as to be potentially lethal. It's kinda like what Aetes did with Jason in Greek myth. Forgal didn't want Cu Chulainn to marry Emer at all, and so gave him a mission hoping that it would get him killed. Cu Chulainn set out for the Isle of Skye to begin his training, with his foster brother Ferdiad accompanying him. Even reaching the Isle of Skye was difficult, requiring the crossing of rough seas just to reach the island. Once they actually arrived, they had to traverse some rather difficult obstacles. The Plain of Ill Luck, the Glen of Peril, the Bridge of Leaping, before finally reaching the gates of its fortress and its guardian, Uachach, Scathach's eldest daughter. Cu Chulainn's attractive appearance wooed Uachach, but then he broke her finger, causing Uachach to scream. Her fiancé, hearing the scream, charged out of the fortress to challenge Cu Chulainn, only to get quickly murderized. After this, and taking Uachach's advice, he vaulted over the walls, put a sword to Scathach's chest, and asked her for 3 wishes: to train him, to allow him to marry Uachach, and to tell him of his future using her powers of sight. I don't understand why he wants to marry Uachach since he has Emer waiting for him back in Ulster, but okay. Scathach agrees to these terms, and so the training began. Cu Chulainn and his foster brother Ferdiad would spend a year training with Scathach, both of them learning pole vaulting, fighting underwater, and much more. The pair would receive exactly the same training, with one exception. Scathach gave Cu Chulainn the spear Gae Bolg and taught him how to use it. This one difference in Cu Chulainn and Ferdiad's training would become important in the future, when the 2 of them would end up facing off against each other during the cattle raid of Cooley. Cu Chulainn would also help Scathach out with a problem of hers, her rival and sister Aoife. Initially, Scathach didn't want Cu Chulainn to get involved, even slipping him a potion to put him to sleep to keep him out of it. But then Cu Chulainn woke up from the potion early and joined the fray, defeating Aoife, putting a sword to her neck, and asking her for a few favors: to leave Scathach alone, to send over some hostages, and to give him a son. She did agree, but asking that while holding a sword to her neck? That's foul. Relating to that, it is said that Cu Chulainn also had some lewd adventures with both Scathach and her daughter Uachach. Yes, Cu Chulainn was a major sex god, just like Heracles and his future nemesis, Queen Maeve. Not long after this, Cu Chulainn and Ferdiad's training was complete. With that finished, and Scathach's daughter Uachach having oddly vanished from the plot, Cu Chulainn then asked Scathach to make good on his last wish, for Scathach to tell him of his future. After setting up the ritual, Scathach invited Cu Chulainn to learn of what was in store for him. He learned of his future battle with Queen Maeve, of all the great victories he would achieve, that he would become a legend. Cu Chulainn was happy to hear that, seeming to overlook the negative parts of Scathach's prophecy, that Cu Chulainn would kill his own son, the one he just fathered with Aoife, and that he would die before the age of 30. After this, Cu Chulainn returned home, hoping to marry Emer since he had fulfilled his side of the bargain with Forgal. But like Pelias did with Jason in Greek myth, Forgal foolishly reneged upon the deal. Apparently, Forgal forgot that he had sent Cu Chulainn to be trained by Scathach in the hope that it would get him killed, and yet it hadn't, which could only mean that Cu Chulainn had now become an incredibly skilled warrior. Cu Chulainn used the skills he had learned from Scathach to break into Forgal's fortress, kill 24 guards, and abduct Emer. Though since Emer was still in love with Cu Chulainn and had refused all her father's attempts to get her married while Cu Chulainn was off training with Scathach, she was basically a willing abductee. As for Forgal, he fell off the walls and died while trying to run away from Cu Chulainn. And as for Scathach, it was said that she would train many other warriors at her fortress, though details about that are sparse. There is also the story that, sometime later, she would become a goddess herself, a goddess of the dead guarding the entrance to Tir na nO, welcoming those who had fallen in battle to enter that realm of paradise. It's not clear how or why she was given this role, only that she acquired it sometime after she trained Cu Chulainn. What other adventures Scathach might have had, sadly, have been lost to time, leaving us only with a mysterious warrior queen who may have had her own extensive legends, but is now largely only remembered for having trained one of Irish mythology's most legendary warriors. Moving into Fate Grand Order, we first meet Scathach in a special trial quest that came out between the release of Okeanis and London. The protagonist and Mash are pulled into a waking dream of Fuyuki, where they meet not only Scathach, but Fergus and Diarmuid as well. This story serves as a pretty good introduction to Scathach and Fate. She is the enigmatic mentor to Cu Chulainn, a talented magic user, and also the first example of the comedy bit where all Celtic servants are depicted as absolutely batshit, obsessed with combat and sex. All of that is true to her original character, more or less, but we also see new elements that Fate added to Scathach, that she is a godslayer who rules her shadowy realm of Dun Scath, and that, prior to the incineration of humanity, she was unable to die, something she finds quite upsetting. I already talked about Dun Scath and the Godslayer thing, so let's talk about Scathach's death wish, which is given even more focus in her interludes. It isn't so much that she wants to die, but rather that she wants to be able to die, to have the thrill of putting her life on the line in battle again. Basically, she's a total combat junkie, always looking for a good fight. But since Scathach has become such an insanely skilled warrior, she was plucked out of humanity, and so is now unable to die. This whole being removed from humanity bit could be a reference to Scathach being made goddess of the dead and the gatekeeper of Tir na nO, where she welcomes worthy warriors to an equivalent to heaven. But that's only me making that connection based on having looked into her legends. Nothing is said in Fate about Scathach being a goddess of the dead or of being the gatekeeper of Tir na nO. It's completely left out. So just based upon what we see from this first appearance, Scathach's Fate characterization is a mixed bag, including elements that are true to the legend, adding some new stuff, and leaving out others. This pattern remains consistent throughout her appearances in FGO storylines. Her appearance in the America Singularity was hyped up since Cu Alter is one of the main villains there. As soon as Scathach appears, everyone takes it seriously. Even Cu Alter is uneasy about the idea of fighting her. And yet, he beats Scathach in a cutscene battle using his Berserker MP, which, well, they say it's a technique Scathach didn't teach him, but that MP is Cu Alter using the bones of the sea monster Kurud as an offensive weapon, which is literally what Gae Bolg is. It's just now armor and a fist weapon rather than a spear. I find it hard to believe that Scathach would have trouble dealing with what is essentially an alternate version of Gae Bolg, the spear that Scathach taught Cu Chulainn how to use. But I get it, they did it for plot reasons. It would have been too easy to just have Cu Alter get killed off by his mentor, and Scathach being defeated raised the stakes of the final battles in the America Singularity quite a bit. Scathach has numerous other event appearances as well. In Summer 1, she uses her runes to alter people's spirit origins to give them swimsuit versions, something that she continues to do more or less every year since. In other words, Scathach is basically responsible for all of the crazy things that happened during summer events, since she got the ball rolling in the first place. She also sometimes puts her mentor hat back on, putting people through grueling training sessions either in those summer events, her interludes, or in her own Land of Shadows event, the one where she got the bunny outfit. Scathach also has a small appearance in Fate Extella Link, where she serves as a mid-story boss fight, having gotten herself oracleized by ruler Charlemagne. Unlike in America, though, Scathach actually is a dangerous opponent here, requiring not only Cu Chulainn but an entire party of servants to take down. Scathach continues to pop in during events now and then, and there are no signs of that changing anytime soon. I know she makes an appearance in Ordeal Call too, now wearing a sweater. A future costume perhaps? We will see. And now for the verdict. What grade would I give Scathach's depiction in Fate Grand Order in the wider Fate franchise? Well, her character design and skill set are mixed, featuring both strong links to her legend, but also stuff they've added for her Fate version. The same is the case for her characterization. On the one hand, you have things that are correct, depicting Scathach as an enigmatic character, supremely talented with both a spear and magic, and a teacher of heroes. But on the other hand, Scathach was not a godslayer who was unable to die. Her realm of Dun Scath was not some dark realm filled with dangerous spirits, and we don't get anything at all about her being a goddess of the dead or the gatekeeper to Tir na Nul. I don't really blame the FGO devs for making these embellishments. Scathach is the mentor to Cu Chulainn, and since he is such a badass, it only makes sense that Scathach ought to be even more so. Having someone whose name means the Shadowy One rule over a place called the Fortress of Shadows, that does sound like some kind of supernatural realm. There's also the fact that Scathach in the legends really does feel like an incomplete character, that there were more legends about her, but that we don't have those stories anymore. But while I can't blame the devs for making Scathach the crazy strong god-slaying ruler of a deadly shadow realm, that's still a major embellishment on her character. Also, as I discovered during the research of this video, while Scathach's power has been exaggerated, there is another character from Irish mythology whose FGO depiction has gotten the reverse, being far weaker and one-dimensional than he should be. Scathach in Fate is a cool character, but her Fate version is noticeably different from the Scathach of the legends. Not enough to damn her, but only just barely. And so for a final grade, I'm going to give Scathach, the Witch of Dun Scath, a D. If you would like to learn more about another character who lives in Scotland, check out my video on Bavan Shi here. Until next time.